Before I lived in Buckingham, I lived in Bumpus, and in neither location are yurts particularly common. So when I saw this particular $1.5 million item in the budget, I scratched my head and said, what's a yurt? And so for the benefit of those here in the building and maybe my mom, who's probably watching at home, a yurt is a circular dome tent of skins or felt stretched over a collapsible lattice framework and used by pastoral peoples of Inner-Asia. Also, a structure that resembles a yurt in size and design. That from Merriam-Webster. I heard the governor's dire budget predictions about a massive shortfall in revenue and a need to close the gap with competing states as it related to how we treated our state employees. And I've heard from the sheriff's associations and the localities as it relates to things like keeping our sheriff deputies' wages above the food stamp level. I've been compelled to break with traditions in how I voted in order to address a recognized need as it relates to treating our women and men in the Virginia State Police with the respect and dignity that they deserve, and creating a pay structure that recognizes seniority as we seek to retain the finest professional state troopers in the nation. I've listened to the senator from Franklin County speak to how community health centers help to close the gap for those most in need and help to more efficiently deliver services without government waste. And I've listened sympathetically as we've talked about how our teachers should be recognized for the wonderful things that they do to make our schools amongst the best in the nation. As I continued my research into the expenditure of $1.5 million for yurts, I learned that you can go to yurt.com, and you can price yurts. Yurt.com is located in California, and their most expensive yurt comes in at about $10,260. Their least expensive yurt comes in at about $4,810. Now, I also learned, pursuant to this particular amendment to the budget, that Blue Ridge Yurts is located in Floyd County, Virginia. And at Blue Ridge Yurts, their entry-level yurt comes in at $6,145, and the nicest yurt they make, which includes hookups for electricity and full insulation, comes in at about $19,430. Now, knowing that the government has a tendency to pay the high-end cost and not negotiate purchases in bulk, presuming that the Commonwealth were to buy the most expensive Floyd County Blue Ridge yurts that we could, we'd end up with about 75 yurts, but currently we don't have nearly that many yurts. And so if we're replacing the yurts that we have in Virginia, we might end up with somewhere between 5 and 10 yurts. Now, presuming that we end up with 10 yurts, so we can look at Kickato, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that wrong, State Park, where we have yurt rentals. And so I thought, well, how many days of yurt rentals booked 100% would it take to recoup the $1.5 million if the Virginia State Park that rents yurts charges the same rates as the private sector? A shameless plug for Massanutten Springs, where we learned that the private sector already rents yurts to people in Virginia. MassanuttenSprings.com. Massanutten Springs, for their least expensive yurt, charges $110 a night. I learned later that the state parks undercut them by about 10%, which is another debate yet to be had, which is why the government is subsidizing industry that undercuts the private sector. But just presuming that the state parks raise their rates, it would take with one yurt 131 years to recoup the $1.5 million investment, because the yurts at the Virginia State Parks are only open between Memorial Day and Labor Day right now. With 10 yurts, it would take about 13 years to recoup the $1.5 million. And as somebody who thoroughly enjoys the natural resources of the Commonwealth, who took a 50-mile canoe trip down the James not too long ago and anticipates walking the length of the High Bridge Trail here shortly after session, all 31 miles. And another canoe trip down the James. I can tell you these are wonderful things, but number one, the private sector is addressing the need, and number two, by golly, could somebody please tell me whether the money that we're spending on yurts as the government competes with private investors in this time that the governor has decried an incredible shortfall in funds could better be spent on community health centers or keeping our sheriff's deputies above the food stamp level, or giving our state troopers the money that they deserved in order to retain them, or giving our teachers a well-deserved pay raise. And the bottom line is, if the budget situation is as dire as it is, and the core essential functions of government are public health and public safety and transportation and education, what the heck are we doing buying yurts? And I understand that the argument is they'll pay for themselves, but the bottom line is right now we go Memorial Day to Labor Day in yurt rentals. We already undercut the private sector with what we charge, and it would take years upon years upon years to recoup this money that I would submit, and I'll make the question rhetorical, would probably be better spent on health care, sheriff's deputies, troopers, or teachers, would it not?